This is guidance for OCR A2 Economics F583 June 2015, question 3A. The question is, analyze using examples how the number of firms competing in an industry may affect the market equilibrium. So what this question is really doing, it's asking you to make a comparison between an industry with few competitors and an industry with many competitors. And so I would suggest that you want to show your economist's toolkit by making use of the models to demonstrate that you have good knowledge of the market structures. For example, monopoly versus long-run monopolistic competition. We're also going to be looking at some perfect competition you can put in there too. You must use specific terms to compare, and I would suggest using price, output, profit, and efficiency as being the things that you want to use as sort of the baseline for your analysis. And the examples should be used throughout and are a necessary part of good analysis. This is directly from the market scheme, so you must make sure you have good examples there. Contestability is an equally valid way to address this question, and we'll have a look at that at the end. So, first of all, let's have a look at some of the mark scheme guidance that we've come up with. To get level 3, which is to say between 9 and 15 out of 15, which is where we all want to be shooting at, you need to be using analysis which is using examples of the effect of the number of firms the effect of the number of firms has on price, output, and profits. So to get up in the upper level, we want good analysis of 2 or more effects. So you look at price, look at output, look at profits, and compare them between a firm with little competition, an industry with little competition, and an industry with lots of competition. Between 11 and 12 is good analysis of 1 effect, or the basic analysis of 2, so it's not quite there. And then between 9 and 10 is just basic analysis of 1 effect. Now look at this, this is very important. If there are no real-world examples provided, you're capped at 9 out of 15, which you don't want to be doing, so make sure you get some good examples in there. Now level 2 and level 1 is to do with application and knowledge, and every single one of you wants to be going for level 3 and how to analyze, so we're just going to focus on that today. So I would suggest you start with a model which has very little competition. You could use short-run monopolistic competition or monopoly, either one of them work, and just run through the model and make it very basic. So you put the cost revenue and the output, you show your downward sloping average revenue curve because we have differentiated products. If we know that one of our rules is the marginal revenue curve is double the slope of the average revenue curve, put the Nike swoosh on, and we draw then the average cost curve, which we should know our rule is the average cost is at its lowest where it crosses the marginal cost. We then know that the firm, if it's profit maximizing, will produce where marginal cost equals marginal profit. So that's our quantity produced. Go up to the average revenue line. Over is going to be the price level that's charged. Go from that quantity line up to the average cost line. That's our average cost that we make at quantity 1. And then everything between price and average cost comes out as supernormal profit. And if there's supernormal profit, in this case, we would also say that there is some deadweight loss, and that's represented by that triangle there underneath AR and above MC. So remember, we want to be focusing on our analysis here. So the conclusions are, we've got a high price, there's lower quantity than could be achieved with greater competition. With the greater competition, this quantity would be coming out a bit. Supernormal profits do exist, as you would want to demonstrate there, and actually put that in your diagram. And also say that this is not efficient. This is not allocatively efficient. This is not productively efficient. It's not allocatively efficient because price does not equal marginal cost, and it's not productively efficient because we're not anywhere near where the average cost curve is low enough. In fact, you could say that the fact that we've got deadweight loss is automatically proof that we're not allocatively efficient. Alright, so that's our first one, and I'll leave it to you to come up with an example of what you'd want to plug in to that structure. Now, you'd want to then move on and explain, analyze what happens when you have more competition. So for example, you move from the short-run monopolistic competition to the long-run monopolistic competition. So if this is our short-run monopolistic competition with some economic profit in there, we would say, okay, well over time, because there are low barriers to entry, more firms enter the market, and this means that there's a greater availability of substitutes, which means that the greater availability of substitutes shifts the demand for our product which will essentially shift the average revenue for that product to the right. And we've seen that there, and we see a shift in our average revenue. It's gone from AR1 to AR2. And if we've got a new average revenue curve, the marginal revenue curve is derived from the average revenue curve, so a new marginal revenue curve comes right in there. We can get rid of our old ones then. This is our new model, and we just have to go through the basics again to say, okay, well, where are we producing our quantity? Our quantity is where the marginal cost crosses the marginal revenue, so that's our new quantity there. We then would say, okay, well, what's our new price level? Our price level is where this quantity line comes in contact with the average revenue line, and so that's right there. We'd say that that's our average revenue or our price. Now, this also is the point, because we've drawn it this way, that the average cost, remember, is tangent to the average revenue at this point here. So our average revenue is also our average cost, which basically means we're no longer making any supernormal profit. We want to compare this back to the short-run monopolistic competition. And what we would say is that price is now lower. We would have seen that by doing the graph. The quantity per firm is lower. Supernormal profit no longer exists. You would say that the enticement of new firms has driven supernormal profit, that is to say profit above and beyond the opportunity cost, is now no longer in the market. But it's still not allocatively or productively efficient. We can see that price still does not equal marginal cost, and we are still not producing where average cost is lowest. So that's the analysis there over those four factors. If you really wanted to take this home, you can look at perfect competition. Now we know that perfect competition comes from this. We've got the market structure, and then we've got the firm's structure. Market structure comes from supply and demand, as we've seen. Supply and demand sets a price level here. That price level is then carried over to the firm. Because it's perfect competition, undifferentiated products means that they have to take whatever price is determined by the market. So the average revenue for the firm is at the same level and just a straight line across as what the price is. If we have a straight line across, one price for the firm, as a firm sells more products, the average revenue is equal to the marginal revenue. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So if this is for the firm, as I said, the average revenue is equal to the marginal revenue. That's the setup. And then we go through our cost curves. Again, Nike swoosh for the marginal cost curve. And then if this is the short run perfect competition, we'd say, well, let's draw an average cost curve underneath the AR line. Make sure that we follow the rules to say the average cost is at its lowest where it crosses MC. And then let's go through to find out where the quantity is. Quantity is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Right here is now our new quantity. At the new quantity, we can figure out, well, what's our price? Our price is, well, it's the market price. No surprises there. Our average cost is whatever the average cost curve is as it crosses this quantity line, and that's our average cost there. This is a firm, even though that it's in a perfectly competitive market, is making supernormal profit in the short term. And so we would conclude that we've got a fairly high price. We've got a high quantity per firm, supernormal profit, which is there. This is allocatively efficient because we will see that at quantity Q, the price equals MC. So that's good, we've got some efficiency. However, it's not productively efficient because we're not producing where average cost is lowest. So what happens then as more firms join the market? And why do more firms join the market? So if I've got my firm's short-run perfect competition curve, and I've got my market curve, this supernormal profit that we described before, again, entices new firms into the market. What this does, by enticing new firms into the market, it shifts the supply curve in the market. So the supply curve shifts from S1 to S2. This would then drive down the market price. As the market price is driven down, the price that the firm receives for its products is driven down. So the AR equals MR curve shifts down like this, and we've got a new situation, a new equilibrium that we'll want to look at. Let's see, Q goes, in this new situation, the marginal revenue equals the marginal cost right here at Q2, and we're now producing right at the very bottom of the AC curve. What we would therefore say is that in the short run perfect competition, we've got this. In the long run perfect competition, we've got this. There is no more supernormal profit made. We are allocatively efficient because the price equals marginal cost, and finally, we're productively efficient because we're producing at the point where AC is lowest. The other conclusions that I've come up with here is we've got a lower price than we did before. We've got less output per firm than we had before, because Q has gone down. Greater overall market output has been achieved. If you look back on the other slide, you see that the quantity for the market has gone out. And productive and allocatively efficient, and no supernormal profits. If you analyzed any one of those, and in that kind of detail, you should be getting the marks, of course, as long as you're applying it to a particular market. Now, there was a question, or there was some guidance about contestability, and I really love this little bit about contestability. If you say, to what extent does competition change price and quantity and efficiency considerations and profit considerations, you could say, arguably, that the amount of competition does change those things quite greatly. You could also say that there are other things besides competition which are going to affect them. For example, if you're in a contestable market. As a review, a contestable market is one which has zero sunk costs, no barriers to entry, no barriers to exit, and the possibility of hit-and-run competition. And so what this would mean is that even if we were in a market that looks just like a monopoly, or just like short-run monopolistic competition, just the threat of new competition, not the new competition itself, but just the threat of it, could actually mean that the firms would not keep their price up here. They might actually push their prices down a bit just to keep their competitors out of the market. And so by doing that, they might set a price which is lower. They might set a price where their profits aren't so great. They might set a price, as they've done here, where price equals marginal cost, which would be allocatively efficient. So what you could do here, and also at Q2, which is to say that the quantity is higher as well. So if you really wanted to argue it, you could say that the conclusion in this case, it's not to do with the amount of competition. If it's a contestable market, it's only to do with the threat of competition. And you could say that the threat of competition will keep prices low. It will keep quantity higher than it would have been. It will make it allocatively efficient, maybe. It will mean that profits are significantly lower than they would be. And it's the threat of competition which is enough to change the market. It's not down to the competition necessarily. It's a really interesting point. I saw a couple of people put that into your essay, and if you could develop that in conjunction with some of the other points, you'd really be getting up there into some of the top levels of that analysis. Now, my last bit of advice is to make sure that you're using examples, and I'm going to leave this over to you to find those examples that you want to use. But if you're using monopolistic competition, remember what we've talked about. We've talked about barber shops. We've talked about kebab vans. Those would be examples of it. Perfect competition would be a Costa Rican coffee farmer, or a fruit seller at a fruit stand. Or a contestable market, a good one would be, we've talked about the fact that the air market from London Gatwick to Newquay, even though there's only one operator, they don't seem to be charging monopoly prices. Something tells me that maybe the threat of new entrants in that market, the broad sense of contestability, which is to say that other airlines could get into that market if they wanted to and crowd out EasyJet, that probably makes EasyJet keep its prices quite low. I hope you find this helpful. Good luck with your essays.